There is a declassified document on the State Department website. It records a 1949 meeting between Admiral Richard Byrd and government officials. Byrd is talking about Antarctica, calling it an untapped reservoir of mineral resources. He argues that America should never surrender its claims to the continent, not until it knows what lies beneath the ice. He says 50 years is a short period in the life of a nation, that no one can predict what resources may be discovered there, or what resources the country may desperately need. That meeting happened 77 years ago, and the moratorium is still in effect. No person, corporation, or nation on Earth can extract a single resource from an entire continent. This is a government document hosted on a .gov URL, available to anyone who searches for it. Almost nobody searches for it. But the man who spoke those words had spent his entire adult life preparing to say them. Richard Byrd was not a bureaucrat. He was a Virginia-born naval officer who had claimed to fly over the North Pole in 1926 and earned the Medal of Honor for it. He led his first Antarctic expedition in 1928, establishing Little America on the Ross Ice Shelf and flying over the South Pole the following year. His second expedition nearly killed him. In 1934, he spent 5 months alone at a remote weather station. He breathed carbon monoxide from a faulty stove, slowly poisoning himself while recording polar temperatures. He survived, barely, and wrote a book about it called Alone. By 1945, Byrd was the most credible voice in American polar exploration, and he was telling anyone who would listen that Antarctica was not empty, that it was a strategic asset, that if the United States did not act, someone else would. To understand why that document exists, you have to go back 3 years earlier, to the largest military expedition Antarctica had ever seen. On August 26, 1946, Chief of Naval Operations Chester Nimitz announced a massive operation codenamed Highjump. The numbers are staggering: 4,700 men, 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier and a submarine, 33 aircraft. This was not a research trip. Congress made that explicit. When they approved the funding, they clarified that Highjump was fundamentally a naval operation. Admiral Richard Byrd, the most famous polar explorer alive, was placed in charge. At a press conference in November 1946, Byrd described the mission as primarily military: testing ships, testing aircraft, testing the new helicopters, training personnel in extreme cold. Secondary objectives included expanding knowledge of the region's geography and geology. That was the public version. The private version, confirmed in expedition documents, included an objective that was publicly denied before the mission ended: consolidating and extending United States sovereignty over the largest practicable area of the Antarctic continent. They were not just exploring, they were claiming. The fleet departed Norfolk, Virginia on December 2, 1946. Within weeks, tragedy struck. On December 30th, a Martin PBM Mariner seaplane designated George I crashed during a blizzard on Thurston Island. 3 crew members were killed: Ensign Maxwell Lopez, aviation radioman Wendell Henderson, aviation radioman Frederick Williams. 6 survivors spent 13 days on the ice before rescue. Their bodies have never been recovered. A plaque at McMurdo Station commemorates them. By January 1947, the Central Group reached the Bay of Whales and began constructing Little America 4. Over the following weeks, aircraft conducted 28 photographic flights. They returned with more than 70,000 aerial photographs covering 1.5 million square miles. They collected water and soil samples. They detected coal deposits. The expedition produced an Academy Award-winning documentary called The Secret Land, and then, in late February, they left. The approaching winter forced an early withdrawal. The entire operation lasted roughly 3 months. The largest military deployment to Antarctica in history, and it was over before spring. But what Byrd said afterward is what matters. On March 5, 1947, the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio published an interview with Byrd conducted aboard the expedition's command ship, the USS Mount Olympus. The interview was given to Lee Van Atta of International News Service. It was never published in English. For 80 years, conspiracy channels have misquoted this interview. They claim Byrd spoke of flying objects moving from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He did not. That fabricated translation first appeared in a 1975 book about Nazi UFOs. The original Spanish text says nothing of the kind. Scholars Colin Summer-Hayes and Peter Beeching translated the full interview in a peer-reviewed paper and confirmed the misquotation. What Byrd actually said is specific and verifiable. He warned that the United States should prepare defenses against hostile aircraft approaching from the polar regions. He said the world was shrinking at fantastic speed. He said the time had ended when America could rely on distance and oceans for safety. This was March 1947. The Cold War was months old. Soviet Arctic military positioning was accelerating. Byrd was talking about polar aviation corridors, not alien encounters, and that distinction matters because the real story is more unsettling than any UFO narrative. Byrd was telling the government, in public, that whoever controls the poles controls the next war. The conspiracy theories serve a purpose, even if unintentional. They make it impossible to discuss Antarctica seriously. Mention Operation Highjump in most online spaces, and the conversation immediately collapses into underground bases, flying saucers, and hollow earth tunnels. This is convenient. Because while people argue about fabricated translations, nobody reads the actual documents, nobody visits the State Department website, nobody asks the financial question. And the financial question is the only one that matters. The US Geological Survey has estimated that Antarctica holds 19 billion barrels of recoverable oil, 106 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Together, that amounts to 36 billion barrels of oil equivalent. Iron deposits in the Prince Charles Mountains run at least 400 meters thick, extending over 120 kilometers beneath the ice. Coal has been found in 2 separate mountain ranges, uranium, chromium, and approximately 70% of Earth's entire freshwater supply is locked in Antarctic ice sheets. 98% of the continent is covered by ice. Only 2% is exposed rock. No commercial mining has ever taken place there. No offshore drilling since a 1973 research project in the Ross Sea. The resources exist, they are enormous, and they are completely untouchable. But the military interest in Antarctica did not begin with America. 8 years before Highjump, Nazi Germany sent its own expedition south. On December 17, 1938, the MS Schwabenland departed Hamburg under secret orders. 33 expedition members and 24 crew. The ship carried 2 Dornier Whale seaplanes, launched by steam catapult. Captain Alfred Richer, a decorated World War I naval commander, led the mission. His crew was selected for polar experience, not party loyalty. One Nazi official rode along to enforce ideological standards. His primary contribution was making everyone listen to Hitler's Christmas speech over the radio. The real purpose was economic. Germany consumes 17.5 pounds of margarine per person annually, and margarine production depended on whale oil. North Atlantic whaling had collapsed from overharvesting. Antarctic waters held the remaining stocks. Securing access to Southern Ocean whaling grounds required a territorial foothold, so they went to claim one. The Schwabenland arrived at the Princess Martha coast on January 19, 1939. Over 3 weeks, the 2 seaplanes flew 7 survey missions. They photographed hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. They took more than 11,600 aerial photographs, some in color. They dropped aluminum darts, each 1.2 meters long with steel tips and stabilizer wings stamped with swastikas, onto the ice at turning points of their flight paths. Claim markers. None have ever been recovered. They named the territory Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. They increased the known area of Antarctica by 16%. And no expedition member ever set foot in the interior, not once. The entire claim was made from the air. Norway panicked. 5 days before the Germans even arrived, Norway rushed to annex the entire region as Queen Maud Land. The timing tells you everything. Germany had not fired a shot, had not built a structure, had not planted a flag on solid ground. They took photographs from an airplane, and a sovereign nation redrew its territorial boundaries in response. That is what Antarctic real estate is worth. Margarine started the race, resources will finish it. And this is the part most people miss about Antarctic history. Every expedition from every nation arrived claiming scientific purpose. Every single one also assessed mineral and strategic value. The Germans wanted whale oil. The Americans wanted sovereignty. The British launched Operation Tabarin in 1943 under the pretense of searching for Nazi U-boats. Its actual purpose was constructing bases in territory Argentina was claiming. Chile proclaimed its own Antarctic territory in 1940. Argentina formalized its claim in 1943. By the end of World War II, 7 nations had overlapping claims on portions of a continent none of them could effectively occupy. The Antarctic Treaty did not resolve those claims, it froze them. Every nation kept its position, nobody won, nobody lost. The game was paused, not ended. The conventional explanation for Highjump is straightforward. After World War II, the military had surplus ships and personnel. Cold War planning required polar operations expertise. Greenland was the real strategic concern, and Antarctica offered a training ground. Byrd was a national hero who could secure congressional funding. All of this is true. I accept all of it. The question is whether it is complete. Because the declassified State Department meeting from 1949 suggests a layer beneath the training exercises. In that meeting, Byrd did not talk about cold weather preparedness. He talked about resources. He talked about sovereignty. He talked about the urgency of expanding the area America could claim before committing to international negotiations. He said the United States had been wise to postpone making official territorial claims. He wanted Highjump 2 to photograph the remaining unexplored territory first, then claim, then negotiate, assess, secure, control. That is not the language of scientific curiosity, that is resource strategy. I want to be honest about where this investigation brought me to a wall. I spent 3 days reading about Admiral Byrd expecting to find a cover-up. What I found was something more ordinary and more troubling. Byrd was not concealing alien technology or ancient civilizations. He was doing exactly what every powerful nation does when it discovers uncontested territory rich in resources. He was moving to secure it. The UFO stories, the hollow earth theories, the Nazi-based mythology, they did not emerge from Byrd's actions. They were layered on afterward by writers who found the real story insufficiently dramatic. And in doing so, they buried the actual documents under so much noise that serious inquiry became socially impossible. The conspiracy theories did not expose the truth, they insulated it. That realization is harder to sit with than any secret base would have been. The pattern from exploration to treaty is worth tracing in sequence. 1938, Germany maps Antarctica from the air. 1939, Norway claims Queen Maud Land in a 5-day panic. 1946, the United States sends a wartime-scale fleet south. 1947, Byrd warns publicly about polar defense. 1949, Byrd privately urges the State Department to protect resource claims. 1957, 12 nations establish simultaneous Antarctic research stations during the International Geophysical Year. 1959, those same 12 nations sign the Antarctic Treaty. Military activity banned, territorial claims frozen, neither recognized nor rejected, held in permanent suspension. Then, in 1991, the Madrid Protocol adds a 50-year moratorium on all mineral extraction. No mining, no drilling, no prospecting, enforceable by international law, up for review in 2048. Any changes require a 75% vote from the consultative parties. The progression follows a logic that has nothing to do with science. Explore, assess, claim, then lock. And the lock does not seal the continent from everyone equally. The nations that wrote the treaty are the nations with existing research stations, with decades of geological data, with ice core samples and seismic surveys and satellite mapping. They already know what is down there. The treaty does not prevent knowledge, it prevents competition. You have watched this channel trace how institutions manage access to wealth. The Freedmen's Savings Bank collapsed and black depositors lost everything while the institution's officers walked away. The Federal Reserve contracted the money supply in 1920 and independent farmers lost their land. Every time, the mechanism is the same. The people who write the rules extract value from the people who follow them. Antarctica is that mechanism scaled to a continent. 54 nations agreed to leave an estimated 19 billion barrels of oil in the ground. Not because the oil is worthless, because removing it would require sharing access, and sharing access means losing control. You live in a world shaped by this kind of agreement, decisions made in rooms you were never invited to, about resources you will never touch, by people who understood their value long before you knew they existed. Consider what happens in 2048. China has been aggressively expanding its Antarctic research presence for over a decade. Russia has never recognized the Madrid Protocol's mining ban as permanent. Arctic oil reserves are declining. Global demand for rare earth minerals is accelerating. The ice sheets are thinning. Access is becoming physically easier every year. The nations that locked Antarctica's resources behind treaty language did so when those resources were economically impractical to extract. That calculation is changing. Byrd said, 50 years is a short period in the life of a nation. The Madrid Protocol was signed in 1991. 50 years from 1991 is 2041. The formal review date is 2048. We are 22 years away from that moment. The moment every nation on Earth reconsiders whether an entire continent's worth of oil, gas, iron, uranium, coal and freshwater should remain permanently off limits. What happens when the answer changes? What happens when the nations that wrote the rules no longer control the vote? What happens when the resources beneath the ice become too valuable to leave frozen? Byrd knew. He said it plainly in a government meeting 77 years ago. Nobody listened because nobody could hear him over the UFO stories. The documents are public, the resources are real, the treaty has an expiration date. And the only continent on Earth that no one is allowed to touch is the one that everyone has already measured, mapped, and valued down to the last barrel. The ice is not protecting Antarctica, the treaty is. And treaties are only as strong as the interests that sustain them. When the interests change, the treaty changes with them. Byrd understood that. He built his entire career around making sure America would be first in line when the lock finally opens. Whether we are ready for what comes next is a question no one in power seems interested in answering.